Story 1. This took place last year, and it still gives me the creeps whenever I think about it. I'm a female delivery driver for Uber Eats, and I've been doing this job for about a year to make some extra money. It's a pretty easy job, but the pay isn't great, especially at night. Normally, any orders I get after 10 p.m. are just crappy fast food deliveries to customers who hardly ever tip. Maybe 2 out of 10 people tip on Uber Eats. So yeah, late night deliveries aren't really worth it, which is why I hardly ever do them. However, this year there was a bonus offer: complete 15 deliveries within a certain time frame and get an extra $75. That sounded great to me. When that kind of bonus is available, late-night deliveries are awesome because there's no traffic, and it doesn't matter where you're picking up from. It's all about earning the bonus. The faster you finish the deliveries, the sooner you can go home with the cash. With empty roads, it was perfect for me. I was on a roll and finished my last McDonald's delivery at 2:30 in the morning. I earned my bonus and called it a night. For context, this happened in downtown San Diego. The center of downtown has fun restaurants and clubs, but as you move out from the core, it gets sketchier. There are lots of homeless camps and other rough spots. I usually try to avoid that area, but to get home and back on the freeway, I had to drive through it. I drive a 2002 Ford Focus, which is pretty old, and nothing in it is automatic. To roll the windows up or down, I have to reach over and crank a lever. Since it's a hassle to do that every time, I usually just keep both windows rolled down during deliveries, as it's easier to pick up and drop off food that way. Unfortunately, on this night, like usual, I had my windows down. I planned to roll up the windows before I passed 16th Street, where the homeless camp was, but I didn't get the chance. As I turned down a side street heading toward the main road, I saw a man up ahead wearing one of those orange reflective construction vests, standing on the side of the road. There's always some kind of construction happening downtown, especially at night, so I didn't think much of it. But as I got closer, the man suddenly ran into the middle of the street, waving his arms and signaling for me to stop. At first I thought he might be directing traffic or trying to reroute me because of some construction, so I started to slow down. I brought my speed down, leaving some distance between us while I tried to figure out what was going on. But then he started jogging toward my car, and before I knew it, he was standing directly in front of it, blocking me from moving forward. He was close enough that I couldn't just drive around him, so I was stuck. I felt a rush of unease. This was really strange, and I really wished my windows were rolled up. It was 3 a.m. on a dark street, and the only people around were me and this guy. I've heard about fight or flight responses and always wondered how I'd react if I were ever in a situation like this. Now I know that my reaction was to just freeze. As I was slowing down, it took me a few seconds to realize something was off. This guy was not a construction worker, despite the hard hat and vest he was wearing. What really got to me was the creepy smile he had on his face. At first, I thought he was just trying to be friendly, but his smile didn't go away. Count to 5 in your head while grinning, and you'll see what I mean. That's what this guy was doing. Now that he's right in front of me, I can tell he's probably homeless. He's an older guy, maybe in his 60s, but homelessness can make people look older than they really are. His eyes were wild, and he was grinning with all his teeth showing. His smile and behavior reminded me of Twisty from American Horror Story. You can Google him if you want. I should have reversed my car, but my brain was in panic mode, and I didn't think quickly enough. The whole time, he's not saying a word, just staring at me. Then, out of nowhere, He jumps onto the hood of my car and starts slamming his fist down. I'm paralyzed with fear just watching him. He keeps pounding on the hood and crawling around on his hands and knees. He didn't say anything, he just crawled around on the hood and kept staring at me with that creepy grin. The worst part was that he never broke eye contact, not even for a second. It was like he was trying to intimidate me. The thought that my windows were open made me want to throw up from fear. I was terrified that if I made any sudden moves or looked away, he might try to get into the car. The whole time he remained completely silent. I think it would have been less scary if he had said something, but he didn't. He just kept pounding on the car and staring at me. The whole thing probably lasted only about 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. I was freaking out, and before I could think clearly or do anything smart, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror coming up behind me from down the street. This man saw the headlights too, and in an instant he jumped off my car and ran toward the new car coming up behind me. I hit the gas and didn't look back until I was halfway home on the freeway. By then I was just full of adrenaline. After that night, I stopped doing deliveries at night for a long time. I definitely don't go to that part of downtown anymore. I now take a longer route home, and I keep my windows up at night if I'm in any area that seems even a little sketchy. What I learned from this is how naive I was to trust and obey someone just because they were wearing a uniform. I didn't even question slowing down at first, even though the situation was really suspicious. Actually, it was the opposite. I felt safe thinking that someone trustworthy was out there. I thought, oh great, a public servant doesn't want me making a wrong turn by the time I stopped. It would have already been too late if this guy had wanted to attack me. I shudder just thinking about it. I eventually calmed down by telling myself that this was probably just a crazy guy who didn't mean any harm. I'm going to believe that's true for my own peace of mind. But what really bothered me was that this guy was dressed like a road worker, complete with a hard hat and vest. He even stood in the middle of the road and signaled me to stop, which made the whole situation seem more believable. Story 2. This took place about a month ago, and we still talk about it because we can't figure out what happened or what was about to happen to us. It was around 7 p.m. in November, so it was already dark in Metro Detroit. I was driving, and my fiancée was in the passenger seat. We were getting off a highway and turned onto a mile road near the city's shopping mall and outlet centers. Since we were so close to the mall, it was strange that the road was so empty at that time of night. As we were driving on the deserted westbound side of the road, we noticed a car stopped in the middle lane, still running. It was dark, except for the street lights spaced about every 80 yards, but we could clearly see the car's brake lights were on. The speed limit on this road is 45 to 50 mph. And it's not a good idea to stop so close to where people are getting off the highway. So we slowed down because we're careful drivers. We drove up to the car and passed it in the far left lane since it was in the middle lane. When we were about a car length ahead, the driver suddenly hit the gas and started speeding to catch up to us. We noticed there was still no traffic in either direction. The driver behind us started swerving between the middle lane and the left lane, almost like they were trying to sideswipe us on purpose. This was an instant red flag. It didn't seem like the driver was drunk or distracted. They were in control of their swerving and got dangerously close to hitting the side of my Jeep while going 45 mph, which gave us a really bad feeling. Before we knew it, a bright spotlight from the other car's driver's window shined directly into our car through the passenger window. I have tinted windows on my Jeep. which usually helps block out the sun, but even with the tints, this spotlight was so bright that it completely blinded us. We couldn't see anything except white light. I didn't have time to check my mirrors before slamming on the brakes, and I'm not sure I could have seen anything in them anyway after being blinded. When we opened our eyes, the other car was already yards ahead, speeding away. I don't put up with nonsense, so I started speeding down the road to catch up and get the car's license plate number. In Michigan, we have Michigan left turn lanes, and I saw the car ahead turning into one to enter the mall parking lot, which has a big roundabout. The roundabout speed limit is about 25 mph, with lots of stop signs and intersections. While my fiancée was on the phone with 911, I was trying hard to catch up to the car. They were running through every red light and stop sign they came across. Dispatch told us not to follow them, but I didn't want to lose them until I could read the license plate. Right as the driver's taillights faded away, I finally caught up with the car. I was shocked to see a large, hand-painted sign on the car's bumper that read, "Licensed Private Investigator," and had a 10-digit phone number written under it in permanent marker. The marker had started to bleed down the sign, and the entire thing was barely legible. It looked so ridiculous that I stopped and took a picture of it. After seeing that, we left the mall and drove around until the police found us and asked for more information. They said it was probably just a scam to extort money or get insurance information from us. But honestly, we didn't understand what they were talking about. We still can't figure out what was going on, but we've never seen that car again, and I'm not sure if it was a legitimate investigator or someone trying to pull a fast one. It was just bizarre and unsettling. Story 3. I had a few friends over for a movie night. The weather was so cold outside that none of us wanted to go out, so we stayed in, put on some horror films, and made popcorn. I live in an apartment building with pretty good security, so we felt safe. Around midnight, we were watching a particularly creepy movie when we heard a strange noise coming from the hallway outside my apartment. It sounded like shuffling, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. At first we ignored it, thinking it might be one of the neighbors coming home late, but the sound continued for several minutes. Then it got louder, and we could hear it clearly over the movie. It was like someone was slowly and deliberately dragging something heavy along the hallway floor. I muted the TV, and we all listened closely. The noise was right outside my door now, and it sounded like it had stopped moving. One of my friends suggested that it might be the janitor doing some late-night cleaning, but it didn't make sense for someone to be cleaning at that hour, especially not outside my door. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a look. I told my friends to stay back and quietly walk to the door. I looked through the peephole, expecting to see a janitor or a neighbor, but what I saw instead sent chills down my spine. There was a figure standing right in front of my door, facing it. The hallway light was dim, but I could make out enough to know that this person was not someone I recognized. They were tall and wearing a long coat with the hood pulled up, obscuring their face. The figure stood completely still, not moving or making a sound. My heart was racing, and I slowly backed away from the door, signaling to my friends to be quiet. We all gathered in the living room, trying to figure out what to do. We didn't want to call the police over something that could just be a harmless prank, but the situation was so eerie that none of us felt safe. After what felt like an eternity, we heard the shuffling noise again. This time it was moving away from my door and down the hallway. We waited for a few minutes before I finally got the courage to look through the peephole again. The figure was gone, and the hallway was empty. We never found out who it was or what they wanted. None of my neighbors mentioned anything strange, and the security cameras didn't capture anyone suspicious. But the incident left us all deeply unsettled. We ended up turning off the movie and staying up all night, too afraid to sleep. Even now, whenever I hear a noise in the hallway late at night, I can't help but feel a sense of dread, wondering if that mysterious figure will return. Story 4. Several years ago, I lived with my ex-boyfriend in a 2-bedroom house we had just moved into. We decided to turn the back bedroom into an office, since the house had only one bathroom, which could only be accessed by going through that bedroom. We often had friends crashing on our sofa, and we didn't like the idea of them walking into our bedroom to get to the bathroom at night. It felt awkward and too personal. About a month after moving in, my ex was out with his work friends, leaving me home alone for the evening. The house was quiet, and I settled in for a typical night by myself, watching TV and eating takeout. Occasionally I heard odd sounds like creaks and bumps, but whenever I tried to focus on them, the sounds would stop. As it got later, I decided to go upstairs to use the computer before bed. At the time, our phone line still wasn't set up, and I was using a pay-as-you-go phone that had run out of credit, so I couldn't call or get in touch with anyone while I was alone in the house. I was sitting in the back bedroom with only a small table lamp on, casting a faint glow, making the room quite dim. I was focused on typing away on my laptop when I suddenly heard those strange noises again. At first I heard a faint rattling noise, so soft I had to concentrate to tell if I was really hearing it, or if it was just my imagination. I turned off my music to listen more carefully and tried to figure out what it was. Then, I went into our bedroom and looked out the front door, but there was no one outside. I returned to the back bedroom and peered out the window, but the view was too dark to see anything clearly. We had a small yard with a high brick wall and a solid wooden gate, and there was no light back there. From what little I could see, there was nothing outside. I sat back down and turned the music on again. About 10 minutes later, I heard a creepy screeching sound, like metal rubbing on metal. It was very faint, as if whatever was making it was trying hard to be quiet. Now I was feeling pretty scared. I went into our bedroom to grab a heavy iron rod we had found in the back of the closet. I didn't turn on any lights, unsure of what was going on and not wanting to alert any possible intruder to my location in the house. I carefully went back into the office bedroom, closed the door quietly, and locked it. I also put a chair under the door handle to make sure it stayed shut. For about 20 minutes, nothing else happened. I started to feel silly for getting so worked up, thinking it was just because it was my first night alone in the house. But this time I didn't turn the music back on. It was a good thing I didn't, because I started hearing whispers, like two people talking softly. Both voices were male, and they didn't seem to be coming from inside the house. I had left the office bedroom window slightly open, and it sounded like the whispers were coming from outside. I went into the bathroom to see if I could get a better view of the alley behind the house. The office bedroom and the bathroom formed an L shape around the yard, with the bathroom sticking out farther. I climbed onto the ledge and carefully opened the bathroom window to try and see into the alley. I couldn't see anything, but the whispering grew louder and seemed to be coming from right behind my gate. I couldn't hear entire sentences, but I caught enough to guess that these men had seen us move in and noticed we had valuable items like guitars, computers, my DSLR camera, and a TV. I figured they somehow knew I was alone and were waiting for me to fall asleep so they could break into the house. I stayed in that position for what felt like forever until a huge thud echoed up to me. Now they had stopped trying to be quiet and were banging on my gate, trying to break it down. I saw the gate shudder and shake with each hit, and I could only imagine how strong these men must be. I was terrified, holding the iron rod and trying to think of a place to hide. Suddenly, a bright light blinded me. I panicked and hid, thinking they were shining a flashlight at the back of the house. But then I heard barking and shouting. When I looked out again, I saw that the house across the alley had turned on a floodlight. I heard grumbling and cursing, followed by 2 sets of footsteps running down the alley. I stayed locked in that back bedroom until my ex-boyfriend came home around 4 a.m. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning I saw that my gate was hanging by just one hinge, making it easy to get through from the alley. The keyhole was scratched up, as if someone had tried to force it open. If the house across the alley hadn't turned on their light, I shudder to think what might have happened. Story 5. This took place more than 20 years ago, but I still remember it clearly. My son was born early at 32 weeks. We were fortunate because he didn't have many problems, and we were able to bring him home a month later. He needed oxygen and caffeine for his slow heartbeat, but after we got home, strange things started happening. Our cat wouldn't go into his room, even though before he was born, I was always taking the cat out of there. Our dog would sit at the bottom of the stairs and tilt his head like he was listening to something. Sometimes, while I was changing my son's diaper, I would start talking, thinking his dad had come into the room. But when I turned around, I realized I was alone. A friend gave my son a peekaboo Big Bird toy that would say peekaboo when you covered and uncovered its eyes. The toy would go off by itself all the time, even after I put it in a box in the closet. I often felt like I wasn't alone in the house. My parents had given us a baby monitor called Angel Care as a gift. The monitor had a pad that we put under the mattress, and it would set off an alarm if it didn't feel any movement after a certain time. Our son was very small, only 5 lbs when he came home, so the alarm would often go off. I would wake up, go into his room to turn off the alarm, and check on him. He was always fine. I never thought the alarm was going off for any reason other than my son being so tiny that the pad couldn't detect his breathing. During this time, I often had dreams about a woman in his room. I never saw her clearly, just the shadow of a woman with long hair standing and reaching into his crib. I don't remember exactly how long my son had been home, but it was at least a month. He was still on oxygen and taking caffeine. One night I was asleep and woke up because someone was shaking me roughly on the side of the bed near the door. I woke up and looked at my husband, asking him why he was shaking me, only to realize he was completely asleep and on the wrong side of the bed to have done it. I quickly got up and ran to my son's room. I turned on the light, something I had never done before, and heard a gasp coming from the crib. Sometimes, when babies suddenly stop breathing, you just need to startle them to make them start again. I really believe that my son had stopped breathing, and turning on the light made him breathe again. After that, the strange dreams, the pets acting weird, and the toy going off by itself kept happening until my son no longer needed oxygen and caffeine. Then it all stopped. The pets stopped acting weird, and the Big Bird toy never went off by itself again. I truly believe that someone came home with him to keep him safe. From my dreams, I felt it was a young woman, maybe in her 20s and indigenous, since I'm Canadian. I'll always be grateful for her watching over him and shaking me awake that night so I could startle my son into breathing again. Story 6. I didn't realize how serious this was until I got older. My mom left me and my brother home alone one afternoon. My brother was around 12 or 13, and I was 9 years old. I was watching him play Xbox in our living room. He had his headset on and was talking to his friends. Then there was a knock on the door in our carport. I ran to answer the door without checking first. It was a grown man I had never seen before. The only thing between us was the screen door, which wasn't locked. He asked, "Are your parents home?" I felt scared right away. It was strange that he was knocking on the carport door. Strangers usually knock on the front door. Plus, our carport was empty, and we only had one car, which my mom had taken. So this man already knew that my parents weren't home. I felt afraid, though I didn't know why. My brother, who was in the other room, came to my mind right away. I've never had a father figure, but my brother has always been the one who made me feel safe, the strongest person in the whole world, someone who could protect me no matter what. With wide eyes, I managed to stutter, "No, but my big brother is here," without missing a beat. The man reached for the screen door and started to open it. But just then, as if by some miracle, an arm reached out from behind me, over my shoulder, and grabbed the door. My brother pushed past me, holding the door and blocking the man from coming inside. Then he slammed the door shut and quickly locked it. The man looked up at my brother, who was a tall, skinny preteen, and said, "Oh, I just wanted to know if you wanted me to mow your lawn." My brother told him we weren't interested and watched as the man walked away and out of our yard. My brother looked angry as he turned to me. "Never, ever, ever open the door for someone you don't know," he scolded. I apologized, realizing my mistake. We told our mom when she came home, and she was upset with me too, but she was mostly thankful that nothing bad had happened. Looking back, I can't believe how dangerous that situation was. If that man had managed to open the door, who knows what he might have done. I feel like I was seconds away from being kidnapped or worse. I thank God every day for my brother and for him being there at just the right moment to stop the man from coming inside. Story 7. I'm a 28-year-old female living in a big city with my husband. Our house is at the end of a row of houses, so we often get people knocking on our door to sell things. Recently, my husband started a new job, and as part of his training, he had to fly to Texas and stay at the company's training center for 2 weeks. Although I wasn't thrilled about being home alone for that time, I decided to be brave and enjoy some time to myself. I continued with my daily routine, watching TV and cleaning the house. One day, while sitting on the couch, I heard a knock on the door. Assuming it was a delivery person, I waited for the sound of the glass door shutting, but it never came. Instead, there was another knock. Not in the mood to deal with solicitors, I ignored it and kept watching TV. After the third knock, I decided to peek out the front window. A man I didn't recognize was standing at the door, so I chose not to open it. He threw up his hands in frustration and eventually left. A few days later, while cooking dinner, I heard another knock. Peeking through the blinds, I saw the same man from before, but this time he was with another guy. The first man was large, resembling Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, muscular and tall, holding a clipboard. The second guy was much skinnier and slightly taller than me. When I answered the door, the large man said, "We are here to set up your security system." were from a security company. I was immediately suspicious since I owned the house before meeting my husband, and we had never installed a security system. I hadn't scheduled an appointment either. "I'm pretty sure you have the wrong house," I said. "Your husband probably made the appointment and forgot to tell you," the man replied, holding out his clipboard with my address on it. Unsure, I unlocked the glass door to take a closer look. Maybe my husband really did forget to mention it. The form looked standard, and the man said they just needed to check for weak points inside the house to install sensors. Feeling uneasy, I told them, "I'm home alone right now, and I don't feel comfortable letting you inside." "We're really from the security company," the skinnier man insisted, showing his name badge. I sarcastically replied, "I could print out a name badge that says I'm the Pope, but that doesn't mean anything." At that point, the large man started pushing against the door, trying to come inside. I quickly told them, "I'm sorry, but I'm canceling your services. You need to leave." He looked angry, staring down at me as if he might hurt me. "We really need to come inside and take care of this now," he insisted, glancing into my living room. Furious, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and waited for them to leave. They walked away on foot, so I texted my husband, who confirmed he had no idea who they were. I immediately called the security company, explaining the situation. The woman on the phone informed me that those men weren't from their company, and there was no record of any appointment. Scared, I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more information. I asked them to patrol my neighborhood while I was home alone for the next week, and they agreed. The following week, after returning from lunch with my mom, we were chatting with my neighbor outside when a car pulled up. A woman approached, claiming she was from the security company, and that her partner had been here a few days ago. Feeling uneasy, I told her there must be a misunderstanding, as I had already contacted the company, and they had no record of any appointment. I then told her to wait while I called the police. As I went inside to call 911, she ran away. The police couldn't do much since I didn't get the car's number, but the entire situation was incredibly unsettling. My mom and I are still trying to figure out what happened, but thankfully they haven't come back since. Story 8. I'm a 17-year-old boy, and my family, except for my 21-year-old sister, often stays in a cabin a few miles away. I'm used to being home alone, especially during the summer when I work and can't travel back and forth from the cabin. Our old house creaks and makes noises, but I've grown accustomed to it, especially since my sister's dog, Bo, is usually with me. His presence is comforting, and I can usually trace any unusual sounds back to him. However, one Friday night around midnight, Bo's barking worried me. I'm usually not scared of being home alone, but the thought of a break-in or uninvited guest still unsettles me. Normally, I let Bo bark for a few seconds, thinking it's someone walking past our glass door in the nearby alley, but that night he wouldn't stop. I got out of bed, which is in the basement, and went upstairs to see what was going on. Bo was standing alert by the glass door, which made me feel a little better. But as I walked closer to close the curtains, I noticed the door was open about 2 to 4 inches. I froze. I had let Bo out earlier that night, but I was certain I had closed the door. I'm a paranoid person with bad anxiety, especially about break-ins, so I always make sure the door is locked. I tried not to dwell on it, knowing that thinking too much would spiral me into anxiety or even a panic attack. I quickly closed and locked the door, making sure it was secure. Using my phone's flashlight, I checked the entire second floor of my 3-story house, glancing into closets and other hiding spots to calm myself down. I found nothing and went back to my room in the basement. While I was trying to relax, I heard Bo walking above me, but it sounded like human footsteps mixed with his. He paced around for about 10 minutes before I put on my earphones and reassured myself until I could fall asleep. Later that night, around 2 a.m., my sister came home from work. Bo was whining at my bedroom door, even though he never goes to the basement. There's even a gate to keep him out. When I got up to let him out, my sister walked in, and we decided to let him out through the front door instead of the glass patio door. We chatted for a bit before I returned downstairs, and she went to the bathroom. I forgot about the open door for the next few days until tonight. My sister, Mom, and I were home for a movie night while my dad and brothers were at the cabin. As we were choosing horror movies, my sister suddenly mentioned that the glass door had been open again the night she came home, just an hour after they arrived. My stomach sank as she said that, and I started shaking. We tried to come up with explanations, like maybe my sister had let Bo out and forgotten to close the door, but then we remembered we had used the front door that night. We realized that someone might have been in the house with me while I was asleep in the basement. The thought of someone being in my house, realizing it wasn't empty, and then dashing out through the glass door when my sister returned is terrifying. The fact that nothing was taken only adds to the confusion. In our small town, there have been reports of break-ins where nothing was stolen or just vandalism. It's not as improbable as it might be in a bigger city. I'm still trying to process the idea of someone being in my house while I was asleep, but the more I think about it, the more worried I become. Story 9. This happened more than 10 years ago, so I'll try my best to remember everything clearly. When I was a child, my home had a balcony that was connected to both my mother's bedroom and mine through large glass doors. 2 trees stood next to the balcony, and I often climbed one to get up and down. The balcony faced the street. One night, when I was about 13 years old, I was home alone because my brother and mother were out. I was reading in bed with a small, dim light when I heard a noise in one of the trees outside. We often had possums and bats in the area, so I wasn't too concerned. The thin curtains on the glass doors let in light from the street lamps, and after the noise I saw a shadow move slowly past the doors. Quickly, I turned off my reading light and stayed very still. The shadow was tall, much taller than any of the neighbor kids or my mom, who was only 5 feet tall. The person moved slowly, like they were trying not to be noticed. While they probably couldn't see into my room, I could see them because of the street lights behind them, creating a dark silhouette. I froze, unable to move or think. Then, I heard someone trying to open a glass door. I didn't know if my mom had locked them, but I wasn't willing to take any chances. I moved quickly and quietly to my bedroom door and locked it. The person continued trying to open the glass door, but it didn't budge, and I felt relieved. I thought I was safe as long as they couldn't get in. After a while, I heard light footsteps moving back along the balcony to my glass doors. I saw the shadow stop right in front of them, and my heart stopped as well. I saw the shadow of a hand reaching for the door handle, and I wanted to cry. It was locked, but I was still terrified. Suddenly, the sound of my mom's car approaching scared the person away. I watched the shadow disappear, and after a few minutes I heard our front door open. It was my mom. I rushed out to tell her what had happened, and she called the police, who arrived after about 15 minutes. They didn't find anyone and told us that the person was probably looking for an easy house to rob. But why would someone target a house with lights on and a child home alone? They thought the person had probably seen me around and knew that I was often home alone. The thought of that was even more terrifying. Story 1. When I was a kid, my parents used to leave me home alone sometimes. Both my parents worked and stopped getting a babysitter for me when I was around 10. I'm an only child, so I got used to being home alone quickly. I could make food for myself and have snacks, but mostly I watched TV or hung out in my room. We lived in a one-level house with a basement. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. The house wasn't big, but it never felt cramped. I was about 12 years old when this incident happened. One night I was home alone. I don't remember where my parents were, but they had left food for me. After eating in the living room, I went to my bedroom. Around 8:30 or 9 p.m., it was completely dark outside. That's when I heard our sliding glass door opening. I was used to hearing that noise because my parents went in and out to the patio all the time. The sliding glass door was connected to the dining room by the kitchen at the back corner of the house. But 5 seconds after hearing the noise, I realized it was strange because my parents weren't home. I became very worried. I started to panic, not knowing what to do. This situation had never happened to me before, and I had never thought it could. Our neighborhood was quiet and calm. I tried thinking of who it could be but couldn't come up with anyone. My bedroom door was open about a foot. I thought about closing it but didn't want to make any noise, so I stayed on my bed. I noticed I didn't hear anyone walking around. We had wood floors in the living room and dining room, so I would have heard footsteps. My TV volume was low, so I would have heard someone. I grabbed my TV remote and turned the volume down, listening closely for another 30 seconds to a minute. I still heard nothing. I started to think I might have imagined it. Feeling slightly better, I decided to check for myself. I got up and walked to the doorway. The living room was to the right, but the dining room and kitchen weren't visible from the hallway. I walked through the living room to the dining room and kitchen but saw no one. The sliding glass door was closed but not locked. This concerned me, but no one seemed to be inside. I thought maybe a neighbor closed it. I couldn't remember if the door had been open or closed before. I walked over, locked it, and looked into the patio and backyard. Everything seemed fine. I went back to my bedroom but decided to look outside from my window. Everything seemed normal. Thirsty, I picked up my empty water glass and went to the kitchen to refill it. As I was filling my glass, I heard footsteps in the living room. Someone was definitely there. I sprinted to the sliding glass door, unlocked it, opened it, and ran out without closing it. I was terrified. I didn't see who was inside but knew someone was there. Outside, I ran to the street, trying to get as far from the house as possible. I had recently gotten my first cell phone and called my mom, telling her what happened. She called the police and my parents headed home. I walked around the neighborhood until my mom called again. My parents picked me up and we drove home, where several police cars were parked. My dad spoke with the officers, who said the intruder was gone. Nothing was stolen, but several things were out of place. We went back inside, and I was scared for the rest of the night. The guy never came back, and I never saw him again. I'm just glad I left when I did. Story 2. Something weird happened to me last week. I was having a movie night by myself in my apartment. I live alone on the second floor. My apartment is fairly new and has one bedroom, one bathroom, a living room, and a kitchen. It was Saturday around midnight, and I was on my second movie of the night. I didn't have work the next morning. My apartment is at the far end of the hallway, next to the stairs, though people usually use the elevator in the center of the hallway. I heard the door to the stairs open and close. It sounded like someone was walking down the hallway. I didn't think much of it until I realized it sounded like more than one person, maybe almost 10. I thought it was strange but expected them to pass by. Instead, they stopped outside my doorway. I thought maybe they were going to the apartment across the hall, but it was a little ways down. Curious, I paused the movie and looked out the peephole. To my shock, there were about 10 guys standing in the hallway, facing my door. They were wearing all black with hoods, so I couldn't see their faces. No one knocked, and they just stood there. I considered asking what was going on, but thought better of it. I walked away, hoping they would leave. I couldn't feel comfortable while they were there. I tried to distract myself with the movie, but turned the volume down so they wouldn't hear it. I couldn't focus and then heard my doorknob turning. It was very quiet, but I heard it because I was already thinking about the men, and my TV volume was low. I felt even more creeped out and in danger. I stayed where I was, unsure of what to do. After about 10 minutes, I got up to check if they were gone, hoping they were. Looking out, I saw they were still there. I ran back to the couch, not knowing what to do. I didn't think I could call the police since they were just standing in the hallway. After 5 more minutes, I checked again. This time they were gone. I couldn't believe it, as I hadn't heard them leave. I was so paranoid that I kept checking the peephole every 10 minutes. Luckily, I didn't see them again. Before going to bed, I walked the hallways to make sure they were gone. I went throughout the whole building without seeing them. Finally, I went to bed around 2 a.m. However, I was woken up in the night by knocking on my door. It knocked twice after I woke up. I stayed in my bed, too terrified to get up. There was silence, and I feared they would break in. I stayed in bed for about 30 minutes before checking the door. No one was there. I went back to sleep and heard nothing more. Since then, everything has been fine.